As we all know, Stoicheia is one of my favorite nations in OverDress, but I decided to take it back to the old days and give Aquaforce's Blue Storm Dragon Maelstrom a try. Welcome back, card fighters, to the Prime Vanguard channel, and today I'll be showcasing you guys my take on Blue Storm Dragon Maelstrom, the encounter deck in Cardfight Vanguard OverDress. I never got the chance to play Maelstrom back in its glory days when it was in Limit Break and it was one of the best decks of the format. But I didn't even know until I started playing Deer Days that this was actually a full-on deck. I knew that they were introducing counter decks for Lucia and things like that, but I was so focused on Grade 4 Magnolia at that time and other things that I was not interested in playing anything else. So therefore, I've been giving this deck out a try, and honestly, it is super solid. On Deer Days, the list has not changed too much from Deer Days simply for the fact that the support isn't really geared towards this, but I've been able to practice in Deer Days and try other things, but the deck is super solid, it knows what it wants to do, it sticks to its strategy, and it's extremely resourceful. It's one of the most resourceful decks I played in OverDress because of how free the ride line is, the resource management, and the fact that you're part of Stoicheia, you have access to a lot of resource-relying cards, meaning any flaws in this deck, we have a lot of cards that can patch the holes in it to make it better. So before I hop on over to camera 2 to show you guys my new deck profile for this, definitely make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you guys are always up to date on my newest videos coming out. With that being said, we're going to head on over to camera 2 and check out this deck profile. Alright you guys, so to showcase the ride line of this deck, I am playing the Aquaforce ride line for Blue Storm Dragon Maelstrom. Now, I'm well aware that Stoicheia has many super solid ride lines that this deck can go into, and I've seen other variations be played, but I actually prefer the Maelstrom ride line. I think that this ride line, especially right now with the state of the Vanguard meta, is really solid. You get all of your pieces on your grade 3 turn, which means that on your first grade 3s for the Maelstrom, whether you're going first or second, the deck can explode. You can use your order card to revive the pieces that are already in your drop zone that you've discarded, or you can hold on to it to revive pieces that you want back later. You also have your Algos and Theo, which will thin out your deck by 2 pieces, which is a lot in Vanguard. And then a lot of the cards that you can search out in Vanguard with this deck is really solid. You'll get access to Tier Dragon cards, which we know some really solid Tier Dragons. The Armada is a free revival that we can get later. It's a really solid ride line that's cheap and inexpensive, which means we can conserve our resources as well. And because this ride line also gives us the ability with Maelstrom skill to call out 2 super solid cards such as Algos or Theo later in the game, which we only need 1 of anyway, the deck has a really good access to its soul, drop, and other zones that it can take advantage of. Alright, so the star of the show, it is the Aquaforce OG, 3 copies of Blue Storm Dragon Maelstrom. Now, Blue Storm Dragon Maelstrom has actually 2 very solid effects. Its first ability gives you the skill to discard a card from your hand, choose a unit with only Aquaforce for its clan or a Tier Dragon from your soul and call it to rear guard. If your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, when that unit attacks since the first battle, you counterblast 1, stand it. The second skill states Auto Vanguard Circle when this unit attacks a Vanguard. If it is the 4th battle of that turn or more, draw a card and choose one of your opponent's rear guards and retire it. Now, Classic Maelstrom is sticking to what Classic Maelstrom does. This is a reference back to its Limit Break skill way back in the day, but Maelstrom itself is very solid. This card lets us take cards we have in the soul, such as Algos Theo and the Tier Dragons we're going to recycle from the board into the soul, and turn them into multi-attackers. That automatically gives us 1 extra rear guard on board that we can use so we can hit the 4 attack threshold to use his second ability to retire something and draw. Maelstrom giving us the extra card draw, pinpoint retire, multi-attack, as well as extra rear guards on the board that we can take advantage of with their skills. Really solid. The Vanguard is extremely resourceful. It's also extremely cheap as well. A discard and a CB is not bad in this deck because it's going to be the only card besides one other card we play in the deck that our counterblast goes to. Therefore, resource management with the soul is not the biggest issue in this deck because you're always getting 1 piece back because it's going to move that card that you swung with back into the soul, so you always have at least 1 card in soul to go for a skill or to use for your Vanguard's ability if you want to. For my next grade 3, I am playing 4 copies of Blue Artillery Dragon Inlet Pulse Dragon. At this point, everybody knows that Inlet Pulse Dragon is without a doubt one of the best resource cards in Stoicheia. Being able to move yourself into the soul and draw you a card, while also being a high-powered attacker, Obviously, that's extremely helpful. In this deck, it's even better. Because Inlet Pulse Dragon is a tier dragon, this is actually a card we can search out from our ride line alone and call it back with the Judgment Maelstrom. Algos will let us check top 7 and call out an Aquaforce unit or a tier dragon that we can call out to the rear guard. It's also extremely solid as well because since this is a tier dragon that moves itself back into the soul on its own, it's a restanding card that we can use over and over again, that we can recycle with the ability of Judgment Maelstrom to discard and call it back out and always get that extra card draw. Meaning that these two synergize very well because this card is going to call this card out, turn it into a multi-attacker for the first battle, or it's going to be a piece that we're going to move out from the rear guard into the soul to use on the next turn after if we don't have other targets in the soul that we want to use. And for my next grade 3, it's going to be the orders. I'm playing 4 copies of Judgment Maelstrom as well as 1 copy of Gradius Gradle. Now, Judgment Maelstrom is the Monster Reborn set order for this deck. The more we put into our set order, we'll be able to give one of our rear guards additional 5,000 power, and this is actually really huge. One of this deck's biggest issues is the fact that our cards don't generate a lot of power, but they do give us extra attacks and they call things back. So Judgment Maelstrom being able to stack 5k later in the game means that as long as the game keeps going on later, then it's definitely going to be a lot stronger the rear guards we're going to be standing with their skills. And because this deck can go up to 4 to 5 attacks per turn depending on your board and setup, you're definitely going to want that card you're swinging with on the 5th battle to be as strong as it possibly can. The Gradius Gradle is because this deck flops really hard when you don't hit Persona Ride. When you don't hit Persona Ride, it sucks because sometimes on first turn grade 3 Maelstrom or second turn grade 3 Maelstrom, really second turn, if you're going second and you go to grade 3, your front row might whiff because your opponent's not going to have rear guards to swing with and they're going to be on grade 3, and your 10k units and your 13k units don't have the restanding effect until your opponent is at grade 3. So if you don't have the correct targets you can call out in the soul for the skill, then you're not going to have the power you need to push. Plus, we play other cards in the deck that actually count on you Persona Riding to be relevant. So therefore, increasing our chances of Persona Ride as much as possible is important. Showcasing my grade 2s, I'm playing 4 copies of Tidal Assaults. Tidal Assault since the OG days of Aquaforce has always been a staple to the deck, regardless of ratio. And in this deck, it's no different. Having the ability to be a unit that can restand on the second battle means that as long as this card is in play, we're always going to be able to hit our 4 attack minimum for our Vanguard skill. Not only that, its first ability is also to Soul Blast 1 and give 5k to our Vanguard. This means that if we ever want to do formation strategies, which will be relevant later, we can have this card power up Maelstrom so it can get past defensives by itself. Tidal Assault being a reoccurring, restanding unit that we can call back at any period in the game and also rush with in the early game, not getting the restand, but just being a grade 2 overall that is revivable, means that this card is an important piece for the deck. I understand there are lists that like to play 2, 3, and 4, and while its ratio is up for debate, I think that 4 is really good in this list because you definitely want to see it because your formation will suffer without it. For my last grade 2, I am playing 2 copies of Tideline Dragon. Now, as I stated earlier in this deck profile, it's very important that we Persona Ride, and Tideline Dragon is one of the reasons why. This card is a tier dragon, which means a target for Algos' skill and for our Blue Storm Armada, but the most important thing is the fact that he fixes one of the big issues that this deck has always had, which is power. Tideline Dragon being able to give 10k to itself as well as another unit means that on your re-attacking strategies, you can use this card to give 10,000 power to one of your units that have the ability to restand, giving them more pressure on Persona Ride turns. This will make your Persona Ride turns a lot scarier as defensives won't get in the way, and they won't be an issue for your multi-attacking units when you're doing the restand combos. Moving on to my grade 1s, I am playing the MVP of the deck, which is 4 copies of Wheel Assault. Now, Wheel Assault, this is how we get our 4 to 5 attack combos while leaving our rear guard standing and our Vanguard attacking. Wheel Assault gives us the ability to, at the end of the battle, it boosts, choose 2 of our rear guards, and swap the positions as long as our Vanguard is Maelstrom. So there's no early game shenanigans with this card, but the fact that we were able to now swap positions anywhere on our board means that our attack patterns can always change and we can drop more aggressive units onto the board with our Judgment Maelstrom as well as our revival skills that we play in deck to increase our attack power threshold. Wheel Assault is a really strong early game piece because it's revival later in the game, and it's honestly in its best position when it's behind the Vanguard or in one of your other rearguard columns. I think personally behind the Vanguard is best because you can swing with a high-powered rearguard column and then swap the position of multiple attackers. This way you can increase your chances of having a booster for your Vanguard so it hits a good threshold on its own with 21,000, which already gets over 5k shield, and then being able to swap the positions of your rear guards depending anywhere on the board as long as it's not in the center. Really solid as well. Overall, it's an extremely versatile piece that helps us give strength to our multi-attack combos, and it's the best aspect of this deck. Ratio wise, 4 solid piece. You need it to do the 4 or 5 attack combos anyway without having to swing with your Vanguard last, so you definitely want to maximize your chances of seeing this card or for reviving it later in the game. Next up, for PGs, I'm playing 4 copies of Tideline Dragon. For my next grade 1, I'm playing 2 copies of Prize Trident. Prize Trident, this is our resource management piece of the deck. We do get to 5 attacks, and sometimes when we're in the grittier games, we have to last a little bit longer, and we're down Counterblast, we're using 2 every single turn. We can use this card to fill up our soul for a Soul Blast cost, one of our skills, as well as get a counter charge back, or if not, be a good late game booster that we can take advantage of on the 5th attack. Last grade 1, I'm playing 2 copies of Performing Petal Diantha. This is honestly my favorite card in Stoicheia. It's a free generic call back from the drop zone, and despite having 4 copies of the order card, sometimes if I don't hit the order card and I actually need more bodies on board, this card gets the job done better than the order card does. Therefore, we have more cards to attack with. It becomes a really solid booster by getting the extra 5k and bringing back any card I want from my drop zone if I don't have access to the order. Lastly, for triggers, my trigger lineup is pretty simple for this deck. I am playing 7 critical, 1 copy of the Stoicheia over trigger, 4 copies of the defensive draw trigger, and then 4 copies of your generic heal trigger. Now, in this metagame, if you want to switch the heal triggers out for whatever effect trigger you want, that's fine. I don't like playing with, matchups and things of that nature, especially with this deck. I think that knowing the fact that I'll have 15k is perfectly fine for me. And then 4 draw triggers, because this deck is somewhat piece reliant. Despite all the searching and deck thinning and calling out from the drop zone, you really do want to make sure you do see Persona Ride. You want to make sure you see Tidal Assaults. You want to make sure you see Wheel Assaults. You want to make sure you see Inlets. It needs to see everything, at least on the board or in the drop, so you can get access to that stuff later with the other skills that you have. So the draw trigger giving us access to those extra cards through our deck so that we can burn through it faster, extremely helpful. The Stoicheia OT, we can actually talk about it now because the other 2 over triggers. I think the other 2 over triggers are great. The blue one is something I consider for this deck, and so as well as the red one, especially the red one, because it's a guaranteed 5th to 6th attack depending on what my attack pattern is. However, the Stoicheia over trigger literally just does everything, and at any period in attack patterns with this deck, it's good because of your 4 to 5 attack combos anyway, always leaving a rear guard standing, and with the Vanguard swinging, really solid. And I'm already playing 7 other crits, something you can do. I don't think Maelstrom is at a point yet where the deck can play fronts. I think fronts would be interesting. If you play the new promo, fronts are not a bad option, because at that point you can restand multiple rear guards and take advantage of the fronts. They're not horrible, but I just actually think that crits are the best way to go. Your Vanguard puts on a lot of pressure. It's got retire, draw, you have multi-attacks coming your way. You have 4 to 5 attacks with one of your rear guards always standing. So even if your Vanguard fails for the last attack, you can put it all to your rear guard to push on the 5th attack. And the 5th attack usually has like some sort of extra skill or power because it's past the 4th battle, and your opponent's definitely not going to want that hit. Alright, card fighters, that concludes my take on Blue Storm Dragon Maelstrom in the current meta of Cardfight Vanguard. Let me know your thoughts and feelings about the deck in the comment section below, and tell me what changes you think I should make to the deck. My final thoughts on Maelstrom is that this deck is not a high tier deck right now. I think that Gondiva being able to board wipe completely is insane. Ballista's speed makes it kind of crazy, and Chrono Jet It's a really gritty fight for that, but I think it has a good chance of fighting everything else. You know, it's got multi-tech, it's got resource management. The deck is extremely resourceful, as well as the fact that the ride line is very cheap, which means you have a lot of late game advantage coming in and thinning out your deck for other pieces. And the deck definitely knows what it wants to do, and make sure that you stick on the game plan for it, because it won't lead you wrong. I like all of that for the deck, but I have to put the deck in a B tier category as of right now, low B tier at that, because of everything else that exists and all the new support that just came out with Festival Collection and Set 11 coming out next month. With that being said, card fighters, I'll see you later. Peace.